My quick answer is yes, but I've been a long time coming to this. And I'm actually a high school teacher and a state representative here in Vermont. So I've been in the classroom for 18 years, and I'm in the classroom for half of the year and then in the legislature for the other half of the year. So it helps me stay really grounded in the reality in education. I've wanted for years to believe students can and need to learn how to regulate it. This is what we do in the adult world. I think we're pretty bad at it in the adult world anyway, and I think we're asking something that's impossible of students. So I think the best thing for teaching, learning, and students' well-being is bell to bell. There's no phones during the school day.
I would like to use the word restricted because we didn't totally ban them. We restricted them. And we got some pushback in Indiana, and the answer is yes, and I'll tell you why. I had 3 people now tell me, teachers, and I don't get into classrooms all that often, but tell me that after a couple of weeks, kids started talking to each other. And so just hearing that was enough for me to think that we did the right thing.
I think it will be a huge net positive, and we have some schools in Vermont that have gone all in this year that I'm following closely and hearing reports back from that they are seeing a real change in school culture, that kids are talking at lunch, that they are talking in the hallway, that there's more sort of social energy and engagement. And, I said the same thing to the fellow legislators then that I say to my students all the time, which is, we're sort of doing an experiment right now on your generation. And I wonder, will we look back in 50 years and say, we used to let kids walk around schools with cell phones and social media? That just seems crazy to us today. The same way we look back 50 years ago, there were smoking lounges in high schools, and there were student smoking lounges in high schools. And we look back and say, that really? So obviously there are positive impacts of phones as well. They aren't just a complete negative the way cigarettes are. But I do wonder if we will look back and say, wow, I can't believe we let that happen for so long.
It can only help. Let's put it that way. So we're struggling across the United States with outcomes, right? When I say outcomes, talking about proficiency in the fundamentals, reading and mathematics and some of those things. And so what effect this had, and probably I'd even say, what does this look like in the future? When I go into stores today and I see 3-year-olds playing with cell phones, or parents give them cell phones to keep them quiet because they're, keeps their mind busy and all that. I don't know, but we look at, I think there are probably some scientific data out there today that would say this is not good.
No, do they change a norm that we've maybe developed? Yes, but I think that's for the better. But no, parents can and should call schools if they need to access their students, and students generally, certainly at the high school level, and my kids are I have middle school kids now too, have email accounts that they have access to. So there are multiple ways, whether it's through an adult in the office or whether it's directly with their child through email. It's perfectly acceptable for a student to check an email. So I think it will be a culture shift, but again, a good one.
Someone has to be a controller as an adult in the room. They know exactly the protocol to keep the kids safe. Should a 13-year-old be having a conversation with their mother, trying to have a conversation, arguing with the teacher to get their cell phone so they can, or be on the cell phone, and through elevated emotions because of the circumstances, be screaming in the room, and now we're talking about attracting a potential shooter in a school, maybe to that classroom. And so there are a lot of things here, and that's probably the worst case scenario, but there's a right way and a wrong way. And my simple answer is that there's an adult in the classroom, let them be in charge and handle the situation appropriately.
I think there can definitely be a way to offer exemptions. There are students who need it for medical reasons, that they are diabetic and their insulin pump. There are, a few cases, I think, where in special education, for students on special education plans, that it might be appropriate. And most of the policies I've seen, either locally or at the state level, make that kind of exemption and allowance. My bigger worry is about students. I have far too many high school students who are dealing with a lot in their life, more than they should be. And so they're using phones and really to deal with really adult things.
If a teacher would like you to have your cell phone to do some research, it's up to the teacher there. There were exceptions for medical reasons. Maybe they have a monitor for blood sugar on them and it goes through their cell phone. They can have their cell phone for that. And so again, comes back to that piece. There were, so academics, emergency, and then for medical reasons, a student could utilize their phones.
I think there will continue to be challenges. You want students to make a video or take pictures of things, and phones are better for that. Just the other day, I had my students doing something. They made models of the brain in psychology, and then they took pictures of their 3D models to put into a project that they were doing. So I think that there's a little bit of an interest here in kind of finding a middle ground. Technology is definitely part of our life. It needs to be something students know how to use. And there are some great tools out there. And yet, how do we set up a classroom so that in an elementary classroom, kids don't need accounts to 8 different things? So again, I think it will be a culture shift, but I think generally we need to try to stick to using technology that's designed for school, which cell phones are not.
Look, they're going to look things up in their phones. They're accustomed to it. Their lives are different than ours because they've always had them available to them. And so, time will tell. We'll see what happens. I remember I had 2 parents call my office and mention that, look, we really don't care what you say. My kid's can have a cell phone because of X, Y, and Z. Well, I'm not certain that's going to be the case because the school has a law that they should follow. And those are the circumstances in which they can have their cell phones, and that's it.
I hear this all the time. I just surveyed about 100 10th graders at my school. This was a very common theme of, I need it for that reason. And I hear it from parents. And as a parent of students myself, I think about that. Absolutely. Research is clear. The National School Safety and Security Services shows that it's actually can be riskier if everyone has devices in a real emergency. It can, dilute communications. It can mean false information is getting out. Policymakers, in my opinion, policymakers, if this is the concern, and it is one for me, absolutely should be banning assault rifles, banning high capacity magazines, should be having thorough background checks, requiring permitting. There are a long list of things we can do on the side of firearms that would go much farther in keeping students safe, and that where our policy focus needs to be.
The answer is absolutely yes, it did. And that's where we came up with the emergency piece. And as I mentioned, thinking through the circumstances of an active shooter in my town, Richmond, Indiana, this was probably 6 years ago. We had a young man get in a classroom or get in a building with a rifle and ended up taking his own life before it was all done. But in that specific building, the classrooms had windows all along the hallway from maybe waist level all the way up. And I put myself in that specific instance. The report from the school, when it was all said and done, is the kids did exactly the way that they had ran through these circumstances or potential issues before. So they knelt down up against the wall behind that thing. If a student wanted to get to the other side of the classroom to get their cell phone, it could have been incredibly dangerous. And so making sure that kids were safe until the adults in the classroom, as I said, say, okay, they can get their cell phones and call their parents to let them know they're okay.